It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. As you probably noticed before you started listening, this episode with Theresa Benson is about twice as long as our average episode. Theresa has so much to offer. Her workshops are a fusion of art and technology, where quilters of all levels discover that color theory and AI can go hand in hand. Whether she's unraveling the mysteries of tech for the quilting community or sharing her passion for fabrics and patterns, Theresa's enthusiasm is infectious. It won't take long for you to join in her enthusiasm on this episode too. Theresa, thank you so much for joining us on A Quilter's Life.
Thank you so much for having me, Paula. I'm flattered that you reached out, and I'm delighted to be here.
When I saw you on Instagram and Facebook, and I saw you several times, I started realizing I was looking so forward to your smiling face. You always have a smile, and when you would pop up, it's like, oh, it's Theresa.
Oh my goodness, thank you. That's so kind. It's funny, friends of mine who sort of help me with my social media, they show me all the data that says that I need to do more videos, but I'm so self-conscious that I hate doing them because I think everybody sees the age spots and the double chin. Thank you for that. I pinky promise you, which is my most serious promise, I'm going to do a lot more selfie videos in 2025.
Oh, great. Because I do always look forward to hearing what you have to say and seeing you pop up. In fact, you just had surgery and you did a little video, and I called my husband over and said, look, she's even smiling after surgery.
You know, when you have teeth as big as mine, they need room. And so I just smile.
I reached out to you instead of you hearing about me, so I'm assuming that's when you heard about me first.
To be honest, it is. But then as soon as you had reached out, I asked my quilt bee friends. I'm in a couple different bees, and several of them have heard of you, and they're like, oh yeah, she's really nice. And she talks to real people about all kinds of things. And I said, okay, so she's asking me to be on her podcast. They all said, do it, you've got to do it. So I apologize. I hadn't heard about you, but ever since I started working remotely, I don't have a commute, and I'm obsessed with murder mystery audiobooks. I don't listen to as many podcasts, even though I have a podcast of my own. So I am behind on especially quilty podcasts, but I have listened, and you are a lovely host, and you do bring out amazing things in your guests. So I hope that I can help continue the tradition of the episodes you've put out so far.
Oh, thank you. There are a lot of great quilting podcasts out there, but I wanted to hear some of these personal stories and hear who these people were. And so it opened up that I could do this podcast. Even since I started, there's a lot of other ones that have come along, and it's just fun.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And we're recording this shortly after quilting finally made it on Shark Tank, right? Last Friday night, quilting went mainstream, and Legit Kits was on Shark Tank. So yeah, I feel like this is a really wonderful time to be a quilter. And so I'm not surprised that more and more podcasts, because Audible's prices are relatively expensive. So for a lot of us, podcasts are the way to go. I just happen to currently be obsessed with the little old lady mysteries that exist in Audible land. I'm sure I'll get tired of them and come back to podcasts.
I want to jump back here, Theresa. Share where you were born and raised.
I was born in Davenport, Iowa, and I lived there until the April after I turned 5. And then we moved to Des Moines. My dad had gotten a transfer with the Northwestern Bell Telephone Company. And so we moved to Des Moines. And at that point, I was the baby. I had 2 older half siblings. And then I was unexpected. My dad's first wife had passed away from cancer, which was really sad. And my mom had been told she could never have children. And so they met at Northwestern Bell in Davenport, dated, got married. She was excited. She had 2 children. He was excited because now it was a whole family, even though he was still grieving. Then, I came along and made things complicated. And so from birth until about 9 years old, I was the baby. My brother, he got married when I was 4. So you can kind of get a sense of the age difference, right? So he got married when I was 4 and moved out. And when we moved to Des Moines, it was my sister and me and my mom and dad. And sadly, about 4 years after that, then they divorced. And my sister went with my dad, also her dad, and I stayed with my mom. And so I went from being the baby and being special, partly because I was sick all the time. It's so funny. I told my better half about my Thanksgiving tradition. I used to watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade from behind a plastic tarp because I would be in this room my dad would build every year in the basement out of 2x4s and plastic sheeting with a humidifier in it because I had asthma so bad. And it wasn't until I was quite a bit older that I understood that there were actually balloons and people and whatever. I just saw blurry colors in the plastic. So yeah, it was weird going from being the baby and being special and everything like that to being an only child dealing with divorce. But yeah, that's where I came from. And it shaped who I am. And my grandma sewed, my mom sewed. I made my first thing for 2nd grade. I made my book bag to go to school. Des Moines was a lovely, lovely place to be back then.
So did you stay in Des Moines until you graduated high school?
I did. Yeah, we were in different apartments after the divorce. Then I was graduating from high school and I had gotten into Duke and Purdue and Northwestern, and I had like first round interviews or something for MIT. And my family, my mom was like, well, you can go anywhere you want as long as it's Iowa State. And I'm like, oh, cool. Okay, then great. And then you can major in anything you want as long as it's electrical engineering, like your uncle, my mom's big brother. And I said, oh, sweet. Okay, I'm going to Iowa State. I'm going to study electrical engineering. And I had been a kid who, even before my parents divorced, I would play school. Like other girls played house, I played school. My dad had put up a chalkboard and I would teach my stuffed animals. Then I would pretend I was a student and I would assign myself homework, and then I would do the homework and then I would grade the homework. And that was like fun for me because I couldn't play a lot outdoors in the winter because I was so sickly as a kid. And no kid wants to play school, and most kids have colds most of the year. So I got really creative. And so everybody always thought I would be a teacher, everybody. But it was important to the family that I get my electrical engineering degree. So I did, and shocked all of my electrical engineering professors that I actually made it. Frustrated a couple when I became president of IEEE, which was a student electrical engineering organization, because they all were like, how are you even still in this program? And yeah, promptly went into the semiconductor industry as a salesperson, but I was a technical salesperson and I viewed my role as teaching customers how my products help them. And in that way, I could do the work. because it felt like I was helping someone. It felt like I was teaching someone, and that fed my soul for a really long time.
Wow.
I'm a nerd. I am a total nerd, but at the same time, I'm creative. When I reflect back on my childhood, I was creative as heck. At one point, I could play 10 different instruments. I couldn't draw worth a darn, but I would take all of the projects out of Highlights magazine. I'd learn them, and then I'd invite all the neighbors over and teach them how to do the project out of Highlights magazine. It's ridiculous that I ever got my electrical engineering degree. All of my professors were right. But hey, you do what you need to in the moment because you don't think you have any other options. And my engineering education has served me so well in other parts of my life that I'm grateful for the experience. I'm not sure I'd choose the same path, but at the same time, it got me here. So it's good.
Yeah, it is fun to see how our past and things we've done have made us who we are today.
Isn't that so true? Yeah.
So was there a special childhood memory that you wanted to share?
I have so many. Let's see. I remember when I made my book bag in second grade. So we had moved into the apartment because my parents had split up. And my mom, she's gone now, but she never knew that I knew something. So when you're first grader going into second grade, making certain aspects of a book bag are just not for your tiny little hands and your hand-eye coordination. And the sewing room cabinet, because it was one of those built-in Kenmore cabinet setups, was in my bedroom in the apartment. And she didn't know that I knew. She was creeping in at night and sewing. So I would kind of forget, honestly. But then every once in a while, I'd wake up and I'd see her hunched over with only the light of the sewing machine. My room's pitch dark except for that, sewing. She probably unsewed a ton of stuff too that I did horribly wrong. Never, ever talked about it. As far as she was concerned, I made my book bag. But that is just a really sweet, sweet memory. So there's that. There's also my very first job ever was at So Fro Fabrics, which used to be in the shopping mall where I lived. And I remember 14 years old and all of these panicked brides coming in to figure out what taffeta they should pick for their bridesmaids' dresses. And I remember thinking, all of it's really hideous and nobody's going to like it anyway. Just pick something. It's okay. When I do talks for guilds and stuff like that, and I kind of go over some of my background, I show several of the different McCall's patterns that I had to help pick out fabric for, and then the resulting wedding party pictures. And every time I apologize because if you came to Sew Fro Fabrics at some time while I was working there, I probably helped you pick this. What do you do and ask a 14-year-old what you should do for your wedding anyway?
Oh, I could only imagine. I know my sister made her own wedding dress, and after she had it made, she was unhappy with it, but she wore it because that was it. And
exactly. There was no David's bridal, and the men would go $25-$30, rent a tux, it goes back. Women, you have to buy up yards and yards of fabric. You have to learn to sew. You're panicking. Taffeta is not easy to sew. I remember, never will forget, somebody did gold lame for their bridesmaids. It's so difficult. Terrifying. If I stuck it out to do a wedding dress, I'm with her. I'd wear it. Heck, I'd wear it out. I would walk around on the street and say, I made this.
Oh, but anyway, then another friend of mine, she made hers for her wedding, and she made a practice dress out of other material. And I thought, you could do that?
That's so smart. So you don't accidentally screw up the, at the time, gajillion-dollar fabric, but now quilt fabric is the price that taffeta was back then. It's crazy.
It is.
So crazy. Oh, memories.
Well, you talked a little bit about your employment, but other than quilting, what other employment did you have?
Yeah, so the first half of my career, I worked for a semiconductor company. So, having lived my entire life up until college graduation in Iowa, I promptly left and moved to Dallas, Texas for about 10 months for training. And then I was planning to interview for a sales job in Boston. And at the last minute, a sales interview came up for the Portland, Oregon sales office. And kind of like your practice dress story, I thought, okay, I'll use the Portland sales office interview as my practice interview for the Boston office because I really want to move to Boston. And there was a rule that said you need to accept the role if it's offered to you. Like if you interview, that means you are willing to move wherever it is. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Women at the time were taking anywhere from a year to 2.5 years to get out of the training program and into the field. It was, an unintentional bias in the organization. So I thought, well, I'm 10 months in. I've still got probably 4 months before I'm ever going to get out of here. So I interviewed for Portland, got the job the next day, had to cancel my interview for Boston. I moved to Portland maybe a month later. Then after that, I was in Silicon Valley with the same company. I got to work on the very first iPod before anybody in the world knew what an iPod was. I got to see that come to life and handle problems and really help people do something extraordinary. And then my mom got sick. I think I got all those genes. And so she had never been a super healthy person, but unfortunately, she was diagnosed with colon cancer on top of a bunch of other things. And so I decided to move to the Midwest to try and take care of her. She was at that point living in Omaha. So I moved to Indianapolis from California, which was a huge culture shock. A week after I arrived and signed the papers on the house there, she passed away unexpectedly. And so I was like, well, golly, what do I do now? So I stuck it out for a little while longer, but I didn't fit in the sales office there. It just was not the right fit. Neither side was happy. And so I took a smaller job at a really tiny company in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, several of us ended up leaving, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I tried my hand at starting a business. I was terrible at it because I only wanted to do the doing, but I didn't want to sell my services and I didn't want to have to be a collections agent. So I had a choice to make. What am I going to do? And I got two offers. One was to go back into the industry I had been in, and one was to do something completely different. And that was go work for a Japanese company in their service and support division. And my whole job was to figure out how to make money even when everything was running fine, because service and support only makes money if stuff is broken. So I moved to the Chicago area and took that job. And I grew that business. One of the service package they were selling, they sold 8 the first year I was there. And the last year I was there, they were selling something like 450 a year. I was like, okay. Next up, I went into an industrial automation manufacturer. I'd never done that before. So if you've ever watched a How It's Made show where peanut butter gets squirted into jars and there's robots and it's almost like a symphony of motion, I had never done industrial automation before. And so they took a chance on me, and I was so fortunate to do some really cool things. And then, as is a thing with me, like once I feel like I've mastered something, I'm like, okay, now what? And so I was looking at either going into the software industry because I had never done that before, or going to work for Second City Works down in Chicago. So Second City, the improv place, had a business division. And COVID happened, and I'm so grateful that it worked out that I went with the software company, because I was able to do some really cool stuff. And that's where I started getting into artificial intelligence, decision automation, process automation, explainable machine learning. I began to build authority and credibility in that space. I would go on podcasts, give talks, work with analysts in that space, talking about the risks and the existential threats of AI, especially when it comes to decisions about bodily autonomy, housing, food, all of that kind of stuff. And then that led me to an opportunity to work at a marketing agency out of Philadelphia. And the impetus for that was 2021 had been an exceptionally hard year. On the 10th of January that year, my big brother died of COVID and complications. Later that same month, my uncle, who had been like a dad to me when my parents split up, he passed away from cancer. Then my dad passed away. Then my nephew, 26 years old, died by suicide in the summer. While I was home on that trip, I discovered I had an uncle I didn't know existed. It was my mom's little brother. She had never told me. I knew there were rumors, but I had no idea. It just so happened I went to where my mom and my uncle had just died were when I was coming back to take care of my sister after her son died. Ran into a cousin. I was literally crossing a crosswalk. He didn't have to honk. He didn't have to say hi, but he recognized me. We started chatting and he said, "Isn't it sad about Uncle Ron?" And I said, "Who's Uncle Ron?" So I discovered in the midst of all of this horrible grief, this person. So my Uncle Ron and I talked that first time for probably 2.5, 3 hours. Turned out we shared a birthday. He was the youngest, the baby sibling of half siblings. My aunt, uncle, and mom were his older half siblings, just like me. We were building this amazing relationship and stuff was just amazing. And then a girlfriend of mine fell, hit her head in a bathroom and died. I was planning to go see my Uncle Ron in January of 22. I had made all the plans and I texted him to wish him a happy Thanksgiving. And my aunt, who I hadn't met yet, my Aunt Ellie, who's a lovely human being, responded and said, "Theresa, I'm so sorry to tell you, but your Uncle Ron has died." And then that Christmas Eve, my better half, Joel, his mother had a massive stroke that has left her with left side neglect for the rest of her life. And so at the end of 2021, I started looking at my life, as you do when all of that happens. And I thought, for so much of my life and my career, it was all about somebody else's vision for me. There's this agency that sees something in me, this marketing agency. I think I want to give it a try. I had wanted to take a break in between the software job and the agency job, but they had an urgent need for me to start almost immediately. And I didn't listen to my gut. And I started and lasted 5 months. And I said, you know what, I've got to step back. And so in September of 2022, everything changed. I said, okay, I need to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And so I took a step back and I started doing consulting here and there. The agency hired me at an hourly rate to do little things here and there with no pressure to be an employee. And I started picking up clients and I have built now, we're going on our 3rd year, Radiant Meatball, which is a marketing strategy and executive advisory firm, which then allowed me to start the brand, the AI Quilter, which is really where my heart is. So I spend the majority of my day working with companies who are doing technology things, but I'm helping them think about their longer term strategy, their messaging. I currently also am vice president of a company out in Denver, working with them on developing next generation products and helping build a marketing team out there. So that's what I do when I'm not doing the AI quilter stuff, which is why I'm not on Instagram a lot and some of those things, because some days I'm drowning just a teensy bit.
Your life is so, so full.
It is. It really is. I'll tell you what, this is why I say I don't think I would trade anything. All of that grief, all of that pain, all of that uncertainty, taking a step in faith in myself, faith in the universe that I'm going to figure this out, that took a lot, but it's been the best decision. It really has.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think you just covered where you live now and how did you get there from where you were.
by car. I drove across the country 3 times.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share about your family?
My family now. So my parents have both passed. My dad in 2021, my mom back in 2005. I can't believe it's going to be 20 years. But the chosen family that I have now is so beautiful and rich. I have gotten to know one of my cousins who, it turns out, lives in the Chicagoland area. So one of my Uncle Ron's children, this person I never knew existed, right? She and her husband and Joel and I get together pretty regularly and stay in touch. My sister and I have a really beautiful relationship, and I give her 87% of the credit. She's just a phenomenal and amazing and resilient woman that I love to look up to, even though she's shorter than me. And I take every opportunity to say that because we're both not that tall. And I have nephews and a niece, and they have children now. In fact, my second youngest in that grouping just had her second baby. So I've got one nephew younger than them all, and he's getting old. He's in his mid-20s now. So life is beautiful. And then Joel's mom is so special. And through how she raised him and his sister, I have learned so much about, yes, what I was missing, but I've learned how to parent some of the parts of me that didn't get some of that stuff. And I've learned new ways of responding to challenges that only could have come from knowing Karen and knowing Joel and seeing how they interact as a family. And then he has half siblings and his sister has kids. And so my nieces, Izzy and Jasmine, give me so much joy too, to watch them grow into young women. It's just beautiful. I had always wanted to have kids. It just wasn't in the cards for me for a variety of reasons. So this chosen family, stitched together kind of like a quilt, right, has just really put me in a beautiful headspace now. I can't say I've always been in as it relates to family.
That is so nice. Besides quilting, are there any other crafts that you do or have done in the past?
When I was a teenager, I was really into cross stitch. Really into cross stitch. I cross stitched so many things. I tried my hand at crochet. I tried my hand at knitting. I'm left-handed, and back then, there weren't a lot of instruction books and things for lefties. I would try and watch my mom. She would do it right-handed, but if you watch a right-hander from the front, you can kind of reverse engineer it. But I could just never get the hang of it. I did crochet a little bit, but I guess I was a stressed out kid because by the time I'd get to the end of a row, you couldn't get the crochet hook through. They'd be so tight. So that's kind of gone by the wayside. Quilting is about exclusively it, but the nerdy side of me has defined craft in broader terms. Because I can't draw very well, I have pictures in my head that I just can't quite get out, that's why I've turned to AI to help me express in words the thing I see in my head. And then I'll turn that into a quilt pattern, or I'll color it just for myself. I actually, above the door of my office here, I have an artwork that I made using AI. I also create web pages for fun. I'm working on a color analysis tool, but I know that doesn't sound like a craft, but it exercises a part of my brain and gives me joy in a similar way that other people might enjoy knitting or crochet or whatever. It's so far outside my normal day to day that it lets that part of my brain rest, and I get to see the result of creation, much like a quilter or a crocheter or a knitter would.
And probably a lot sooner than a quilt is made.
Yeah, it all depends. Yeah. Although some of my things turn out to be total disasters and I don't understand why, I'm so grateful that there are now AI programs that I can ask. I can give it several lines of code and I don't have to sit there and try and figure out what I did wrong. I can say, hey, what's wrong with this? And it'll say, and it doesn't make me feel stupid, because if I were to ask friends of mine, they'd be like, well, duh, you didn't do blah, 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 right? But you can program an AI to be really polite and gentle with constructive feedback. I sound very lonely.
No.
Like I'm still back in the thing that my dad built with the plastic tarp, only now I have an AI friend. That's basically
Well, my daughter did not like the GPS because it did not tell her she did a good job when she made the turn. So
man.
if you can make the GPS nicer, some people would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Are there other hobbies that you do?
I have gardened since starting my own business and the AI Quilter brand and teaching and traveling a lot for work. The garden has been fallow the last couple years, but I do like to garden. I do a lot of, I suppose it's a hobby, but I love reading to learn, especially about how to be human, right? Like how to be more authentically whoever I was supposed to be before I had to go get an electrical engineering degree from Iowa State. So a lot of exploring that way. And then last year, a girlfriend of mine and I would say it's a hobby / passion project. We started a podcast. Not near as prolific as yours quite yet, but it's focused on helping people sort of see and hear from people who have tried and failed or been hurt and they got up again and tried again. It's all with a lot of humor because we touch on really dark topics around chronic trauma and PTSD. None of this is sounding like a hobby, but it really is, because it's such a special thing to be able to talk with her, and then we have different guests on, and to hear their stories and to like witness them and their experience. And we get emails every once in a while that just move a person to tears, where they heard something and it touched them. And then I suppose the last thing, again, hobby adjacent, is I'm writing my first book. So I spend a lot of time doing that and editing that and trying to get it out the door.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Another thing on your plate. Wow, it's amazing you get stuff done.
I'm a compulsive overeater, and it's not just food, it's life. I took quite a bit from the buffet of life, and I'm just working my way through it a little bit at a time.
Well, thanks for putting that podcast out there, because there are so many that need to get through their trauma.
Yeah, it's so true. We named it Hilarious because the whole idea is Stuff is rough. And the older I get, the more I know that all of us are walking wounded. We're all walking wounded. And so many of us judge our own lives against the highlight reels of everybody else's. Instagram, that's why it was really important to me to say something when I was days out from surgery to just come on. I'm trying to get braver about being authentic and just put myself out there. No makeup, hadn't washed my hair in I don't know how long. I'm kind of like this because I can't sit up because so many adults now have never really seen awkward Polaroids that come back from the 1 hour photo, right? The 97 photographs that were nothing and were ugly and horrible, but that your big sister or big brother gave to your friend or the boy that you thought was cute, right? Everything is filtered and pristine that goes out in the world. And so podcasts like ours are intended to sort of peel back all of that stuff and just put it out there. In fact, the first episode of our season 2 is entitled Emotional Dysentery because it's about just putting it all out there.
So I asked the question about your other crafts and hobbies to find out, do they show up in your quilting at all? And I know your AI information does.
Absolutely, it does. How I even got there was, again, I can follow instructions well. Highlights magazine back when I was a kid. But honest to goodness, I can't draw worth a darn. I can't easily get out of my head and onto paper the thing that I see. So I had known about Bisa Butler for a long time, but I had the opportunity to see her exhibit at the Art Institute of Chicago. And I walked away from that going, wow. And she has degrees in art and is just this profound spirit and creative genius. And I, of course, was like, I'll never be any good. I can't do this. And AI has been for me an opportunity to, like I said, like get out of my head all of the crazy little ideas that I think of. And then from there, what happened is I thought, well, what if I took one of these images and just played with fabric? So I made every possible mistake you could make. I accidentally ironed fabric straight to some paper. One of my quilts still has parchment paper. If you bend it, you can hear the crinkling inside, but I just kept on trying. That was my Princess Diana quilt. It was one of the first times that I can ever remember where at the end of it, I didn't compare my work to someone like Bisa Butler. I didn't wonder what everybody was going to think about it. I looked at this thing and thought, I made this thing. I had an idea in my head and it came out pretty much exactly like I could have hoped. I don't feel shame about it. I don't feel less than about it. There are knots and threads and wonky places on the back. And I don't care because to me, it is beautiful. I actually had somebody ask me, oh, is that Dick Van Dyke? I think it's obviously Princess Diana, but hey, somebody was like, oh, is that Dick Van Dyke? I don't care though. It brought me so much joy. And from that point on, I started thinking about, well, how can I help all of those people out there who also have felt less than, who also are uncertain, who also compare themselves to these huge, amazing artists and think that all of their drawings look like stick figures and they can't ever figure things out. How might I show them what I did so that they can try and see if they end up feeling the same way I do, or even their equivalent amount of joy. So, yeah, that's how it all crept in. But then along with that came all of the knowledge around the ethics of AI and an awareness of what's going on from a legal perspective and the privacy concerns and the bias and the stereotypes and the everything. So a lot of people who attend my workshops, they don't understand that for the first bit of time, I am going to break AI down the way we learned math. We didn't grow up with calculators in our hands. Even today, kids don't only rely on a calculator in school. They are taught that if Paula has 3 apples and Theresa gives her 2 apples, now Paula has 5 apples. Because you have to learn the basics in order to trust the technology. And so for the first hour of any extended class I teach, I get back to basics in AI, and everybody thinks they can't understand it, but I've come up with analogies that are relatable. And that's always been something that was important to me. I noticed when I was in sales, all of my male coworkers would use either analogies about sports or war, and I didn't care about either one of them. So when I would teach about technology, I would use analogies of curling irons and quilting and sewing. And I would leave the men in the room confused, but all the women understood technology for the first time. And so I'm doing the same with AI in this space.
Guthrie and I ran a computer business for 18 years. So we've been in that space, and we are looking forward to, and we have a positive attitude towards AI, where I know a lot of people don't. But, any technology can be used for good or evil. So we're looking forward to it.
You couldn't be more right that AI itself is a tool. The analogy I use in my classes is a seam ripper is a tool, right? We don't necessarily want to use it. You don't use it for everything. Like, you're not going to use a seam ripper to sew, right? A lot of unsewing, but not to sew. However, if I were to stab you in the eyeball with a seam ripper, you would tell me a seam ripper is a weapon. Similarly, AI is a tool, and wielded properly, it is beautiful. However, follow the money, understand how it's being used, understand the potential risks, because it can be weaponized, and it is weaponized. And the thing that is unfortunate and still evolving is a lot of the fear and anger and frustration, especially from creatives who feel as though AI is plagiarizing them, who feel as though AI is taking from them. And it's really sad. I teach at a lot of libraries. I do in-service days at libraries and things. We talk about copyright. Is it fair that you can ask AI to write a poem about a squirrel on a high dive or whatever, and it comes up with a poem that closely resembles how Emily Dickinson might write a poem? Is that fair? And the thing that keeps me okay with it is, how did any of us learn to write poetry? How did any of us learn to write? I'm finishing my first book. How did I learn to write? How did I learn what my voice was? It was by reading the works of others and then coming up with, based on the patterns of speech, I learned I don't want to write like Herman Melville and Nathaniel Hawthorne. I would rather write like a Sarah Silverman or somebody like that in terms of how I want to be in the world. But I couldn't have known that had I not read it. And it just so happens that AI is this hungry student that can read all of written history, everything that's ever been written. And so it's the scale that's the problem, not the AI. It's also the scale that's the solution, because having all of those references, understanding the context, recognizing patterns that we as humans can't see, AI is able to respond to you, pray about it, to me. It can make something that I'm trying to create on paper. I can draw a picture, take a picture of it, give it to one of the AI platforms I work with, and it can create the thing that I see in my head, but I can't get out any other way. So it may be a threat to some, but it's a gift to so many. It's important to remember that AI itself is neutral. It is a tool. It is how it's wielded. Like, I no longer will put in the names of famous people. My first two AI-based quilts were Princess Diana and Audrey Hepburn, and I realized that that's not fair to them. So I'm very conscious to instead describe the type of person I want to make a quilt of. I used to, and most platforms don't allow it anymore, use artists' names for the style of work I wanted to create. I've now done the work to learn the various movements that those artists were creating in, and I instead, just like if I were a student of art, learning about Cubism, learning about Impressionism, I now use the language of those movements in my prompts out of respect for artists and their work to make sure I'm not plagiarizing them. But that's on us as humans to understand the tool and understand. I want to validate the concerns that people have, but at the same time, remind people we're all pattern machines. We're all pattern machines. We see something, children mimic the adults in their lives, but that's what we are. And that's what AI is, just on a scale that's unimaginable for a human brain.
Mm-hmm. Who introduced you to quilting?
So I mentioned I moved to Portland, Oregon, and it rains a lot in the wintertime there. And I had a crotchety old customer who was a product manager for a medical technology firm, and he was the decision maker at that company. So I had to build a relationship with the guy in order for him to specify our products. I was never the sort of hunter salesperson. I was a farmer salesperson. I'm from Iowa. You tend the soil, you figure out the situation at the company, and then you solve the problems that you see, not you need to buy my products, blah, blah, blah. And so I remember sitting with him. I was, 24 or so. And he's like, Theresa, don't be like the kids that work for me. And I'm like, oh, okay. He goes, you guys all got gold stars, and you would start a school year and not know stuff. And then you'd learn it. And then you'd get on the other side and you'd get a gold star. And then you'd go away and everybody would rah, rah, and you graduate and you do it and do it and do it and do it. And then you get into corporate life. And let me tell you, Theresa, that'll never happen again. You don't get that in corporate life. You're in one project, and sometimes before that project is done, you're pulled off into another one, especially if you're good. So you never actually see anything to completion. And if you hit your sales numbers, you're always going to be pushed for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I'm like, okay, this is really morbid. Where are you headed with this? And he said, Theresa, get yourself a hobby with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just get yourself a hobby. I don't care. Mine's woodworking. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I came away from that, and living in Oregon back then, in Portland especially, there was a fabric store called the Fabric Depot. It was the size of a supermarket, full of fabric. It was amazing. And I don't know now how I met this woman, Anne, but Anne was my age and she was a quilter. And I had sewn and worked at Sofro Fabrics and the whole thing, but I didn't really know about quilting. So Anne turned me on to quilting. And then I found out from one of the guys in my office that his mother-in-law quilted. And so he told me more about quilting. And that's really where it started. And my first quilt was 5-inch squares. I picked the fabric to match a chair I had at the time. I don't think a single corner matches. It's just squares. It's just 5-inch squares. And then I stitched in the ditch, but I was clearly drunk the entire time I was driving on that ditch because nothing is straight. I didn't know that you are supposed to bind a quilt. So I did what I had done with all kinds of other things, stuffed animals, bags, whatever. I did the backing, the batting, and then the front inside out, sewed around 3 sides and left a little bit. And then I turned it inside out and stitched that up and I called it done because I had no idea, but I was hooked. And I remember the next quilt I made was a Irish chain that I gave to a good friend of mine. And I didn't have a fancy sewing machine. And so Anne and I would sit there. It was the first year of the television show Survivor. We'd sit there like 2 little old ladies, and I'd hand quilt this quilt that I had made for my friend. Yeah, I did that for a long time. And then work got in the way for more than a decade because I was a high performer. Then my mom passed, then I moved, then I got married and I got divorced. I moved again. And here in the Chicago area, I picked it back up. So it's really only been maybe the last 10-ish years that I am really creating to any great extent.
When you got back into it, did you know at that time the steps like the size of the seam allowance or some of the tools, or did you just learn all that in the last 10 years?
I remembered some of it, but I didn't understand how important it was. So funny. I just posted a picture on Facebook in response to a question. I had asked a question, if you could make one quilt all year, what would it be? And somebody had said trip around the world. I tried one, but I really didn't understand how important a 1/4-inch seam was. And so if you're off by a 16th of an inch and you have 13 blocks that are all off by a 16th of an inch, you're off by almost an inch when you're all said and done. So I remembered a lot of it. I had taken a couple classes when I lived in Indianapolis when I had a moment. And so I remembered a lot of it. But again, I didn't really understand it. I still am not proficient at hiding a thread after I'm done machine stitching. So a lot of my quilts have little knots on the back because I can do that better. That's my signature, I guess. Gotten a lot better with 1/4-inch seams. In large part, I have a better sewing machine that I actually maintain versus a lint monster like my old one was. Never got cleaned, never got oiled, never got serviced. Yeah, so I picked a lot of it back up, and the rest I've relied on. I have a ton of quilt books. I love quilt books that have step-by-step pictures, not just, oh yeah, you just wave your magic wand and then this free motion quilting design is done. No, it shows you're going to make a little curve about this big and then this. Shout out to Angela Walters and Lori Kennedy. 2 of the best free motion quilting books I own are from them. Yeah, so just being more patient with myself. And then joining a quilt guild really helped too, because people there have taught me it's okay not to know everything. And when you go on a quilt retreat, you watch somebody else attach their binding and you're like, holy crap, that's how that's supposed to work. And then you can ask questions. And I'm not a great YouTube learner when it comes to sewing. When it comes to coding and programming and learning applications, YouTube is great, but being able to ask questions as a person does has really helped my quilting techniques.
Oh, cool. And whether it's a quilt that you have made or that someone else made, do you have a favorite quilt?
I'll tell you what, that 5-inch quilt where everything doesn't match up and it's frayed, and I can tell the place where the dog I had at the time started ripping it apart. That's a pretty special quilt. I bring that to every class I teach because it reminds me, and this is a mantra of mine, don't be afraid to suck at something new, especially with the types of things I teach. Everybody's intimidated. Nobody thinks they can learn it. Guilds are confused. What is the class about? Right. And so I bring this along with Audrey Hepburn or my abstract dog or some of the other things that I'm doing. And I show close ups and I pass it around. It's like the podcast that I'm doing, or the fact that I went on Instagram with no makeup and barely coherent. It's so important to me to show up as myself so that other people can feel comfortable doing that too. And so that one has really, really turned into it. It wasn't for the longest time my favorite quilt, but it's really turned into that for me because I can look at that and I can see where I came from. I don't think I'll ever give it up. I love that thing. It's falling apart. It needs binding. It's a mess, but aren't we all?
Mm-hmm. And talking about the tools that we use, what one are you so thankful that you have?
Rotary cutters, just in general. Thank you to whatever woman saw a pizza cutter and said, why aren't we using that on fabric? Right? I mean, that's just magic. I'm also grateful for the person who invented the doodad that can help you put safety pins together or undo them. Like if you are a safety pin baster, that saved me so many calluses on so many fingers and so many pokes from when your finger slips on the point. Yeah. I know those are kind of basic. The other one more recently that I have come to love, even though for all of my quilt life, I was fine, is left-handed rulers. I know we lefties are in the minority, and most of the stuff I do is right-handed for the most part. But when you're doing a lot of cuts as a lefty, most often all of the numbers are upside down or backwards if you flip the ruler over, and the angles are backward. Like you have to sit there and twist your brain around. And so left-handed rulers are becoming a favorite of mine. And then lastly, a light box. That's 4, not 1. But the first 2 are kind of simple. The last 2 are kind of fancy. A left-handed ruler and a light box and a silicone mat. Okay, 5. That's it. But seriously, silicone mat. I had gotten some for Christmas for baking cookies and stuff in our kitchen. And I was starting to really get into what I call commando applique. And I was trying to figure out how I could do this thing and not have it stick until I was ready for it to stick. I had gotten these silicone mats and I thought I had invented something amazing. And then I discovered that the entire multi-billion-dollar quilt industry had figured out that silicone mats were beneficial to quilters several years prior. But I love them. I love how we embrace technology over time, we quilters.
Uh-huh. Are you a person that loves each step along the way when you quilt, or is there a particular step that you look forward to?
I think the imagining and the fabric pulling is probably one of my favorite parts. I have come up with a method for how I organize all the fabric in my stash based on a color tool that I have that I got, 25 years ago in Indianapolis. The teacher that I had taken a class from taught me the color tool, and then the engineer brain in me said, hey, sort your entire stash using that. So it makes it pretty effortless to be able to grab fabric. But then I always have fun putting in little unexpected color twists here and there. And I always had the 108 crayon box of crayons. So I love that creation, that moment before you can make the first mistake. Like you accidentally, your rotary cutter slips and you slice into something that you needed later. And then I like the moment just before you have to quilt the thing, when the flimsy is done, when it's laid out on the floor, and you can kind of breathe for a moment. You've laid out the blocks throughout to make sure you like the layout, but you can breathe for a moment. I like that moment too, because for me, the tough moment is the quilting part, because I just went through weeks or months of effort and all of this intention and seam ripping and doing all of this stuff. What if I don't pick the right quilting pattern? What if my flowers look lumpy or my feathers look strange? They aren't Instagram worthy. And that's when all the fear and the shame and the, oh my gosh, what if creeps in, is that last little step. And then binding, it reminds me of cross stitch. I love just sitting there and doing it while I watch a show and talk with Joel. And it's a brain dead, lovely activity that keeps your hands busy. And then everything in between is you hang on and hope you're doing it right.
Yep. Share your worst quilting experience.
It's this trip around the world. So I had seen them everywhere. I just thought they were the most beautiful, amazing things. We had gone to Paducah and we went to Hancock's and they had this gorgeous trip around the world quilt up on the wall. And I told Joel, I'm going to make one. I'm going to do it. So I found it in several different quilt books. I followed what I believed to be, I followed the rules. I made my tube. I did the things. Man, that 16th of an inch will get you every time. When you have 13 fabrics, the 16th of an inch adds up. I didn't realize that my machine wasn't calibrated. I didn't at the time have a 1/4 inch foot. I got a 1/4 inch foot after the first one didn't match up with another set, but I didn't clean my machine, calibrate my machine, do all of the things. So even though there was a 1/4 inch foot on it, my needle was over just a little and it kept happening. I had a good eye for a 1/4 inch, but the needle was off. I got done and I sliced them all up and I lay them all out and I stitched them together and I'm realizing, wait, this thing is 20 inches. This one's 19 inches. This one's 19.5 inches. Nothing matched up. Well, now I've got these things that are 13 by 13, tiny little 1 inch square. I'm not going to take that all apart. And so that hung like on a pants hanger, all of the various blocks. And I hung it on the back of the quilt room door. I was so frustrated. And I thought it was a personal failure, right? It was all about me. It wasn't, hey, maybe there's something else wrong. I finally made lemonade out of those lemons, though. I almost put them in a Quilt Guild charity thing to see if they could do something with them. But one of the bees I belong to, I made everybody in the bee a little pouch. And I used these blocks from the land of misfit toys that will never actually fit together into these beautiful little matching pouches for everybody. But it took me probably 4 years to kind of stop belittling myself every time I saw those. They're just squares, Theresa. Why can't you do it? Why can't you be like the other kids? You know, all of that crap that goes on in all of our heads to varying degrees. But something has happened, I would say the last 3 or 4 years, where it's like, oh, wait, life is really short. Oh, wait, none of these things really truly matter. You can make lemonade. If it's a little bitter, just add more sugar. It's all good. But yeah, that was awful. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I think it was how I treated myself that was the awful part of it all.
Yeah. And I love how so many of these stories turn out. It ended up being great.
It did. So that's where the name of my company comes from, really. Radiant Meatball. I was married, my ex-husband, and I was so just angry and frustrated. I was in Indianapolis and I felt like I was just bouncing around all over the place and had no direction. And I was just angry. And I thought of like a picture of an electron, you know, where it's spinning around a nucleus. And I started thinking about human beings. We're just bags of meat with souls that are driving us. Really, we're meatballs bouncing around on this planet. And I had this epiphany. You can choose to be angry or you can choose to be radiant. And so I am a radiant meatball. So because there are certain choices we have to make in life, and I don't always feel great. I'm sitting here telling you how great things have turned out, but at the same time, I worry about things. I'm uncertain about things. When you have your own business, and I have various business partners that work for me and do work on my behalf, you worry, you want to make sure the executives that your clients are happy. You have to figure out how to give coaching. You have to let people go. There are all of these awful, horrible, no good, very bad things that go on every day. Like I said, we're all walking wounded, but there's more good than not.
Yeah,
And so I choose to be radiant. I choose to focus on that.
I love that.
Thanks.
What has drawn you to making quilts instead of doing anything else with your time?
My answer has changed over time. First, it was not an easy gift, because any quilter listening knows quilting isn't easy per se, but it's a quick enough gift in a pinch that's personal. Getting out my Gingham Girls coloring book and my 108 crayons, coloring a picture and giving that to a friend when they have a baby is not socially acceptable. So being able to play with the fabric and pick and choose the pattern and all of that stuff is so enriching, and it feeds that creative part of me. It also, frankly, helps feed the engineer part of my brain, because if any quilter thought that they were bad at math, you're all wrong. You're incredible at math. You use it every single dingle day. You probably know the decimal for 3/8 and 5/8 and 7/8 faster than Siri. But over time, especially the last couple years, why I make quilts is really to show other people they can too. I have a little contact form on my website, and I have people who reach out and go, I don't quilt, but I want to try that. Can I do it? And I'll send them an email and go, have you ever done paint by number or something similar? If yes, you can do this. Some of it you're going to need to be a quilter to do, but believe it or not, you probably know 10 quilters, but you've just never had that conversation, and they can teach you the rest. A lot of libraries have maker spaces now with sewing machines for those people who don't have them. And so I quilt now because I'm hoping that in doing so, I'm reaching somebody who maybe wants to try or doesn't think they're creative, or who has told themselves they're not creative, just like I did for years. Maybe I reach them and I can pass that little spark from me to them, and they'll at least try. There's a 14-year-old girl over in the United Kingdom who got 3 patterns for her 14th birthday because her dad saw my stuff. And she's never quilted before, but he's like, she'll try anything. And that's what I hope. That's why I quilt now. It's fun. I don't have any wall space left. So I make it for the sofa, and I make it for the bed, and I make another one for the bed. And yeah.
Are you allowed to share what you're working on right now, or is it a secret for something coming up?
I'm allowed because I'm the boss. So I'm really excited. At the end of last year, one of the people that works with me said, Theresa, you should really have a catalog for retailers. I can't do that. Yes, I can. So last year, before the surgery and everything like that, I sat down and I looked at the inventory of quilts I want to make, because I have bajillions. I have more ideas than there are grains of sand on Daytona Beach. But I came up with, I think it's like 16 or 18 patterns I'm going to release over the course of the year, which means I need to draw every one of them, color every one of them, try every one of them in fabric, all of that stuff. So that's pretty exciting. I actually have a calendar of patterns that are coming out. And then the other thing I'm working on is a book. When I was living in Indianapolis, I was a co-author of a book of Christian devotionals. Like I was one of several people who contributed to that book. And I've always wanted to write. In fact, when I moved to the Portland sales office, the regional sales manager and I were coming back from a customer meeting, and he says, Theresa, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I didn't have mentors to tell me this. That's supposed to be where you talk about your drive and that you're going to be this amazing salesperson and win awards and all the things. I'm like, I want to write a book. And he just looked at me like, what are you? And I tucked all of that aside. Well, I am working on my first book. The surgery kind of set some of that back a little bit. I had hoped to release it before now, but it's in the works and it's coming. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, those are a couple of the things that I'm really excited about that I'm working on. And then getting better at social media, like saying hi more frequently and just being myself.
On your book, is it fiction, nonfiction, or what genre?
It's nonfiction. It is a book about how to use AI in creative processes. So it's definitely geared more toward quilters, but it's for anybody who is creative. It talks about what to expect from AI, what's unfair to expect of AI. It talks about some of the things I mentioned earlier: ethics, stereotypes, risks, how to wield the tool wisely, right? It's amazing. We make kids take driving lessons and take a test and all this stuff to drive a car. But essentially, the world's most amazing supercomputer is freely available to pretty much everyone. And so I talk about how to comport yourself when interacting with AI to not only get the results that you'd like, but also how to not propagate some of the problems that we see and to keep the tool as neutral as possible, because there are going to be people who use it for ill. And then there's tons of images. I have basically like recipes for prompts to try, things that I've learned work and don't work when working with fabric, especially, which is a 2D medium, because AI likes to create photographs and really complex things that don't translate well to certain media. And so, yeah, it's a how-to book for people who want to try their hand at it, don't know the first thing about it, can't get to one of my classes, and kind of want to try and fail alone where no one can see them. It's something to meet them where they are versus having to go out to the Wisconsin Quilt Show or QuiltCon or whatever. Yeah, that's what that's all about.
That's so exciting.
It is. The book, it is rich with pictures, and there are little exercises. It's an 8.5 by 11 format, so people can write if they want on the pages and experiment and figure out what worked for them and what do they like. And yeah.
How fun. That will be great information to have. Please share a quilting tip.
Clean your machine. Clean your machine. Learn how to clean your machine. I don't care how young or old you are. Go to your local quilt shop that has the type of machine you have and ask them. Bring your smartphone if you have one. Record things. Don't be ashamed if you don't understand. Ask again, but clean your machine and maintain it. I know that's not a true quilting tip, but it is something that is so lacking. And I don't know if it's people don't think they can. Oh, that's something that my husband should do or whatever. You can do it. Get over yourself. It's okay. Maintain that machine. You spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on this piece of equipment. It is your joy, your quiet time. It's the thing that you love to do. And yet, next to your body, it's the thing you probably least maintain. Because that's my second tip, which would be stretch. Stretch, move, get up. I'm sorry that they're not like, oh, hey, here's this trick for flying geese, but especially women, and I know your audience is mixed, but especially as women and especially as quilters who do tend to create for others more than we create for ourselves, we tend to not maintain us. And I say that as an overweight woman who needs to stretch more and move my body more and everything like that. None of us are getting any younger. None of us get out of this thing alive. And if we want to be able to quilt for as long as possible, we need to do the things to maintain the rest of the quilting machine, which is our body. That would be my advice, is maintain. Take care of yourself and take care of your equipment.
I was telling my husband that I was doing my pressing exercises when I'm pressing the seams, and I need to leave that iron sit there for 20, 30 seconds. I do twist or marching in place or squats or something.
Brilliant. Yes.
And it helps.
That's so smart.
Helps me keep the iron on it a little longer that I need to do. Otherwise, I'm moving it too quickly and it's not getting a good press. And it's helping me move.
That is so smart. That's like the happy birthday song during COVID. They say, sing happy birthday while you wash your hands. I haven't done that. I'm going to have to do that. Do squats or something. Strengthen my core. Oh, that's so smart.
I always assume that people start quilting as a hobby. So what triggered it for it to become a business for you?
When friends, more than one, kept telling me I should. And when I had friends from different guilds who either were friends with the program's coordinator of their guild or were, in fact, the program's coordinators, asking me if I could come teach, that solidified it for me. But what actually happened was nothing short of sort of miraculous. I mentioned that I left the agency job at the end of 22. Like I'd been there 5 months and I realized it wasn't for me. And I decided to take this time for myself to reflect, to grieve, to do all of the things. And I realized I hadn't been in a library in years. And I love libraries. I love them. I can't say enough about libraries. They are miracles that exist in communities. This cooperation among total strangers to take care of a book and bring it back in pristine condition so the next person can have it, or libraries of things that libraries have. So anyway, I had been a little stir crazy and I went into the library and they had just gotten a donation of a brother mounted on like a dream frame or whatever, Quilter's Dream Grace Company thing, where it was a traditional domestic with a slightly longer neck on this frame. It was in their makerspace and I walked in and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is amazing. I can't believe you have it. Can anybody come in and use it? Yes, but it doesn't work right now. Oh, what's wrong with it? And that started a conversation with the makerspace coordinator. And I said, well, here's the thing. I am not currently employed. I have time on my hands. Would you mind if I came in every day and I read a little bit more of the manual and I tried different things, because nobody else there knew how to fix it? And I'm like, I'm a quilter here. I brought quilts the next time I came to prove my creds, right? And I got the thing working. So then they asked me to teach the employees in the space how to use the machine, maintain the machine. I had quit this job that I thought was my dream job at this agency, had no idea what I was going to do, happened into the space when that machine wasn't working. There were aspects of how that worked that were grounded in technology that at that industrial automation company job I had learned how those things worked so I could explain things again in plain language. Well, then that turned into, can you teach some of our members who are quilters how to use the machine? We'll pay you. So then that turned into, hey, we had a family lose a loved one, and she was a Black woman. And we wanted to put together something around Black History Month and quilts. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. How can I help? I met with the Makerspace director, who is a Black woman herself, and the daughter of the woman who passed. And I acknowledged, because as white women and white people in America, I have learned so much about everything I don't know and can't ever possibly experience or know. And so I said, if I'm doing this, I need to be very transparent in anything I do, that I am not coming in to do this. I am serving this vision that you guys have. And so Celicia and I, the Makerspace person, decided on a whole program where we taught quilting basics, quilting fundamentals, all these different things. And it culminated in anybody who attended the class would make a prescribed block, whether it was shoe fly or monkey wrench or whatever. And we thought maybe we'd get 20 blocks. We ended up with a quilt that was like 8 feet by 9 feet, and it hangs in the library. It's made entirely with donated fabric. It's made entirely with donated labor, donated thread, donated time, donated fabric cutting, donated everything. And the community, white women, Southeast Asian women, Black women, came together to create this incredible thing that if Dorothy Wilhoit, who passed, if she hadn't, well, then that led to speaking engagements with the Illinois Library Association. My friends started saying, Theresa, what are you doing with your life? Because every time I would talk about this project and how humbled I was. And then we had the opportunity on Juneteenth of the same year to do a thing down at the Hancock Building, because there was a celebration for Juneteenth at the Hancock Building. And again, we thought, nobody's going to come to a quilt thing for Juneteenth. It's going to be all this other cool stuff that the Hancock was doing. It was standing room only. TV crews showed up. It was so moving. And I am so grateful that I was able to get out of my own way and truly serve the project. And it brought me back to all the things that I love, which is I want to help people. That's what drives me. I want to help people believe that they can do something. I want to help people realize that you can get through this dark time. I want to help people achieve their vision of something that they have in their brain, which in this case was Celicia taking Dorothy's fabric and turning it into the celebration of Black history. So coming off of that, then I put together my very first class, my very first lecture, and here we are.
Several times I've seen where you posted that you were going to be at this library or that library. So that's neat to hear the background on that.
Yeah. And none of it would have happened if I hadn't listened to the tears and the pain of being at that job that wasn't right for me. Instead of thinking, I need the money, I need the money, I need the money, I listened to the pain. And it's not been without effort. It's not been without work. I can't live off of the AI quilter yet by any stretch at all. I'm not somebody with 1 million followers, although if you aren't following me, please do follow me on your favorite platform. But I hope that if I do the work and I stay humble and work hard and I serve others, that the right things will follow. just like a farmer needs to nurture the field and plant it and then water and maintain and fertilize and pull the weeds and all of the things, you know, the parable, right? If I can remember those things and just keep my head down and not worry about the fame and the this and the that, then the people who hear my message will hear it. The people who want to learn will learn. And fingers crossed, good things will come. Sponsorships or second books or articles in magazines or more opportunities to teach and laugh and build a community of people who are curious about things and are inclusive and creative and not afraid to screw up.
The way the quilt community has grown and grown and grown, it needs teachers like you.
Thank you. That's so kind. It is a gift to be able to teach. Seriously, I am a kid who literally played school when I was a little kid. That's all I wanted, was to help and teach and learn and do. Yeah, it's a gift to be able to teach, and it's a gift to see the aha moments that occur.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The other fun thing that happens a lot is people are like, I didn't see a class like XYZ on your website. Do you do it? And I'm like, tell me more about what you need. What is it you're trying to solve, right? I go back to salesperson teacher, Theresa, and I go, what is it that you're missing that you're not finding? How can I combine things that I know? And I believe in the miracle on 34th Street philosophy, which is the Santa. When the little boy wanted a fire truck, he said, Macy's doesn't have it, but Gimbel's down the street does. I believe in that philosophy. If I am not the expert, I will never teach a class on triangles unless they're foundation paper piece, because I suck at triangles. But I know people who are incredibly smart, and I can aim people toward that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we know that you're the AI quilter, but how did you decide on that name?
I got really creative with my company name, Radiant Meatball. And people are already really confused by that, don't understand it. As a marketer, I realized, hey, you should probably name your company closer to what it is. And especially given how confusing what I'm trying to do is, fusing technology and quilting together. So I started searching first for domain names, honestly, because there is a domain, AI Quilter. It's not me. So I'm like, okay, well, THE are the first three letters of my first name, the. In fact, that's how I tell people to spell my name. I say, hey, look, there's a Benson, THERE''S. There's a Benson. That's how you spell my name. So I'm like, okay, AI and quilting, the Theresa. So the AI quilter. That's kind of how it came to be. It was really born out of how do I encapsulate what it is in such a way that it's slightly startling? Because whenever I wear my t-shirt, people are like, what in the heck is that? It's somewhat startling, and it's a conversation starter, and then. So it was somewhat intentional and also somewhat born out of understanding the audiences I wanted to approach.
So the AI quilter has only been in business for a couple years now?
Yeah. I officially taught my first class as the AI quilter in May of 2023. Yeah. Now, I was doing stuff before then, and I did AI and quilts before then. But the first time I actually sat down and started to build out a brand and all of the things was May of 24, because it's 25. So it was just last year I taught my very first class as the AI quilter. And it was in November of 23. So a year after everything, that I sat down and, okay, how can I incorporate the logo of Radiant Meatball, which is the little circle, into the brand, but make it separate? And gosh, I'll need a website, and what will I teach and how will I teach it? So Yeah, only about a year. But I made my first AI quilt in 2021.
And I wanted to congratulate you on teaching at Phoenix at QuiltCon this year.
I know. I can't even. Paula, what is happening right now? I don't even know. I am gobsmacked that I'm getting to teach there. It is such a privilege. Thank you to everybody who sold out my classes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The one-armed bandit is going to teach you all about AI. In fact, I had one person who reached out. Her sister got into my class. She didn't because it sold out before she could. And she's like, do you need an assistant now that you only have one arm? I'm so humbled and so grateful. And I can't wait to meet everybody. I'm super embarrassed by the t-shirts I'm going to wear, but they're awesome. So look for me. On the front is going to be my logo. On the back is going to be stuff to hopefully make you laugh and ask questions. I hope to meet tons of people. I taught at Wisconsin last September. I'm teaching in February. Both of them are a year earlier than in my mind I had planned. I thought, nobody cares about this stuff. Nobody understands what I'm trying to do. No, people are hungry for this. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I cannot wait for Phoenix. Houston, eventually. I'm a little intimidated by that place, but Houston eventually.
So getting to teach at QuiltCon, what was the process?
I shut up my inner critic. I listened to my friends. I trusted that if more than 3 people thought I should try something, that maybe they're right when my negative thoughts were trying to get in my way and tell me I can't. And then the MQG, those people are so organized. They very clearly lay out, it needs to be about this many words. It needs to include images of what you're planning to teach, because these people who are sitting there putting together curricula for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are spending thousands and thousands of dollars to be there, right? They can't sit there and talk to you and understand you and get the vibe of what you're trying to do. So I wrote stuff, gave it to friends, listened to their feedback, wrote more stuff, gave it to Joel, listened to his feedback. Why aren't you saying about this and that and the other? And there are different speaking and teaching things there. There's like 3-hour workshops, all-day workshops. There's, I think, 45-minute lectures or something like that. And for me, it was more than the Portland interview as practice for Boston. It was more than that because I really wanted to do this. I am beyond. I can't even. Thank you to everybody at the MQG. But you can't ever get good at something without sucking first. And so I figured, you know what? My friends have weighed in. I'm just going to try. If it doesn't go well, the success was that I tried. And then I'll try and find out what didn't land so that I can adjust, and I'll try for 26. So it was staying focused on not getting it and instead staying focused on the trying. And I think that's really important because I think your authentic self comes across more. Because if all you're trying to do is pitch someone to get them to do something, but you don't sound like you, it'll come across on paper. It will. Yeah. So you submit outlines and descriptions and pictures, and you just follow the instructions that they have, and then hit refresh on your email for a month and a half or whatever until you either get a rejection or you scream with delight that you're getting to teach next to, honestly, quilt heroes of mine are teachers at QuiltCon. What am I doing there? But I belong at the table, I guess. Somebody thinks so. So
you definitely do.
Thank you.
And this is an area that we really need to learn about. So it will be great.
Thank you.
Well, thinking back to that first lecture or workshop that you gave, how exciting was it when you gave that?
It was amazing. I cried a couple times. It was ridiculous because I was just so grateful for the opportunity. And I started out by telling a little bit of my backstory so that people who didn't know me well learned, like, hey, I know it says AI and don't get all wigged out by that. I really am a quilter also. Yeah, I ended up tearing up a couple times talking about how grateful I was for the opportunity to teach. I kept on looking at the programs lady who had signed off on the contract and just kept saying thank you, thank you, thank you after. But it was so exciting. And I do some fun stuff in my live lectures. Like there are some things that I'm not going to tell exactly what I do on the podcast, but there are some surprises that happen. And I had someone recording from the back of the room because, as a teacher and a lecturer, I've learned from other teachers and lecturers, just like at a retreat as a quilter, you learn. I learned that you need to have video of you teaching because some organizations don't believe you that you teach. I'll never forget it. There's this video where I do the thing, and there are like 3 rows of women who they all just start turning and looking at each other and whispering and like, what the heck is happening, sort of thing. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful because I got them. I reached them. I connected with them. I didn't see it in the moment while I was teaching, but when I looked back, I just got full body goosebumps and everything like that. And then I close out a lot of my classes. We actually do a thing with AI where we tell a story because a lot of people don't understand that AI is generative AI. It's not Google. It's not going and finding something and serving it up to you. It is creating, it is generating something brand new. And so I do a thing where I ask one person for one part of it, almost like a digital Mad Lib, and I ask somebody else for a different part. And we wrote a story together as a group live. I had no idea what the AI was going to say. I had no idea what they were going to prompt. None of it. People, it blew their minds. And it blew my mind that this group of women were open to this. And so many women came up afterward and they're like, oh, I get it now. I had no idea. I didn't understand. It was scary. I only see the stuff on the news. I could do that with my grandchild. And I'm like, exactly. It is a neutral thing. It is the seam ripper of technology. It's how and when you wield it that makes it helpful or dangerous. It was beautiful.
And you've been making the patterns now. So how exciting was it when you sold that first pattern to someone you did not know?
Oh my gosh. It was amazing. I ran around. The first couple patterns I sold were to people who work for me or friends of mine or whatever. Yeah, the first time I wrote a handwritten thank you note, I slipped it in the package because I'm a teeny tiny business. There is no money being made right now. It is all love of quilting. I guess I cry a lot because I cried then too, but it was like happy. It was amazing, but it took a while. And then when I released a pattern, Hazel May, it's a little French bulldog. When I released that pattern, I released it on a Friday and I had a sale on a Saturday. And I was like, what? I went berserk. It's just crazy. And then when people buy them in person, it's nuts. Really? You like this thing that came out of my brain one night? That's amazing.
By looking on your website, your patterns are very unique to you. And I wanted you to share how you feel they're different from other quilt patterns you see around.
First off, there's a lot of humor in my instructions just in general. I try to be very approachable in how I communicate. And again, I also use analogies. So I think of my patterns very much like the paint by number from the 70s. Quilt by number was taken, and I respect that whole approach. I've actually spun mine up slightly differently. In every pattern, I've got starter and then intermediate and more advanced type things. I only have the intermediate ones on the website right now because if I haven't mentioned before, I'm a teeny tiny business and I also have a couple other full-time jobs. But inside, I give people what I call their paint palette. they can either follow the colors and make it exactly like I made it originally, or they can go out on their own. But what I do, and this is all from everything that I didn't know when I was doing this, is I take the time as I'm designing the pattern to put in numerical order from one to whatever number. I think the most different fabrics the pattern has is 16 right now. That's about it. I put it in order from lightest to darkest. And then I walk you through step by step why I do it, what it prevents, what it solves. I have pictures. And I do this because I went through all of the mistakes. And it's not that other pattern makers don't also care about and teach and do, here's how to make a block faster, better, easier. But this is new territory for a lot of people. And I am more interested in, this is a fishing reel, this is fishing line, this is a hook, not even hand a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish. No, teach a man what a fish is. Get to the fundamentals, walk you through. And so far, the feedback has been really positive. Probably the one negative is that some of the fonts were too small. I fixed that for future patterns, but I use a lot of analogies, talk about granimals, paint by number, anything that I can think of that would connect with folks so they can get the concept in their core. Actually, it comes with everything too. With my patterns, you get printed light steam seam 2. So, like, let's say you want to make Hazel May. You don't have to sit there and trace. Like, I have a friend who does wool applique, and she has to first trace everything out onto steam seam 2 backwards. And then she puts it on the fabric on the wrong side, and then. No. In the kit, the intermediate level kit, you get printed steam seam 2. It is all numbered. Like, this is piece 1A and 1B and 1C, and they're all grouped together. It's all already reversed for you. You don't have to think about it. But then after you do your first one, if you want to make more, I sell more printed light steam seam 2 if you've bought a pattern already, or I also give you a digital download. So if you want to print them out, trace them, and do your thing, you can do that too. So that's also something that sort of sets me apart. There's no tracing and the waxy surface and everything like that. Now, with the top level one, it's all digital. It's a much lower cost option, but there's more work and more labor that the person has to do who buys that pattern, which is why I haven't launched them yet. I want to make sure that those instructions are really bulletproof. The printed light steam seam 2 is a game changer. Unless you're as drunk as I was when I made my first quilt, you cannot fail making one of my patterns.
Is there anything else about your business that you wanted to share?
For the people who want to reach out, I want to thank people in advance for the grace that it might take me a little bit to respond. I am still recovering from surgery, can't really type. I'm trying to catch up with work, but I will respond. I do classes, and not just quilting classes. I do AI 101 classes. I talk about the environmental impacts of AI. I make custom classes. You don't have to be a massive technologist in order to enjoy one of my classes. I've recently come out because a quilt shop in town asked me if I could teach at their shop. And I said, okay, I'm going to need a projector screen. I'll bring my own projector, blah, 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 blah. And they go, we don't have wall space. We can't. And so I realized, look at the assumptions I'm making about people I want to serve. And so recently I've come up with classes that don't require a lot of setup, and they're more almost like pattern based, where I talk through how we got to the pattern that the people are going to make without having to present, without needing Wi-Fi, without needing some of those things. The thing to say about my business is that ask. If you don't see it, don't let that stop you. It could be we were totally on the same wavelength, and I just haven't hit publish on the new class page I'm putting up, or I have a blind spot that I wasn't aware of, and I'm happy to adapt. And if we're not getting enough of the right type of educational content out there, let me know. A big shout out to the AI Quilt Guild members over on Facebook. I really thought I'd be more available than I have been, but hopefully in 2025 that's changing so that I can be like more live and more videos and more how-tos and everything like that. And then my book, I'm self-publishing it, but I'm publishing it through Amazon and Ingram Spark. So it should be available if local quilt shops want to stock it. They'll be able to. And I'm also, like I said, getting ready to release a wholesale catalog. I've been working with my lawyer on what should the terms be for wholesale to retailers, getting all of those details together. So hopefully in the next year, people will be able to get the AI quilter patterns where they are. But obviously I mail and send thank you notes, and I'm available for Zoom, and I travel. I just want to meet people where they are, whether it's online or on YouTube or in Facebook or Instagram or in person, whether they're uncertain or they think they know it all. Let's have a conversation.
It's so wonderful. Share where we can find you.
I am on Instagram at BAI Quilter, THEAI Quilter. I'm also on YouTube under the same name, BAI Quilter. My website is theaiquilter.com. On Facebook, the AI Quilter has a page, and then we have a thing called the AI Quilt Guild. It is completely free to join. The vision behind it was that I was going to be able to be much more engaged in dialogue there, more like tutorials and tips and tricks. Unfortunately, in 2024, I got incredibly busy. I'm so grateful that I did. Work has been quite busy, but 2025, I hope to be able to nurture that amazing community of quilters. You know, management consulting, executive strategy, how to use AI in your business, radiantmeatball.com, radiant like the star, meatball like the food.com.
Well, thank you, Theresa, so much for joining us on A Quilter's Life. It was wonderful hearing your story.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a privilege to be able to join you. I'll definitely be spreading the word about A Quilter's Life. Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. Please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.